Welcome to Beyond the Corporate Mask with Suzanne Assam and Emma Templing, a podcast with honest conversations about work, presence, and the parts of ourselves we've been told to hide. Have you ever said yes and immediately regretted it? You say yes to that one extra task, even though you were already running late, or you say yes to drinks after work, even when you really needed a quiet night on the couch by yourself. You say yes to be polite, to be liked, to be a team player.
Yeah, and what we often forget is this. Every time you say yes, you're also saying no to something else. No to rest, no to the project you actually care about, no to being present with your kids or with yourself.
Oof, that really hits home. Because, we rarely think of it that way, do we? Saying yes feels generous, but sometimes it's actually just self-abandonment in disguise.
Yeah, exactly. And today we're going to explore why setting boundaries is so difficult and how you can begin to say no in ways that protect what matters most to you.
Welcome back to Beyond the Corporate Mask. My name is Emma.
And I'm Suzanne.
And today's episode is all about boundaries, and specifically how costly it can be to always say yes at work, at home, in your way of leading, in life.
Yes, and I have to say, I really love that we're making this podcast because I know a lot of people recognize this and find it so difficult to say no, myself included.
Me too.
We will talk about what makes saying no so difficult and how you can start to recognize when a boundary is needed and how that boundary actually feels.
Yeah, we'll look at how things like people pleasing or blurred roles all play a big part in all of this. And we'll offer some real life stories and tools to help you say no in ways that are clear, compassionate, and actually embodied.
Yeah, and what I would really like to mention is that although we tend to think about boundaries as rules, maybe even as walls, boundaries are about having a relationship with yourself, but also with others. And it's actually very interesting that we tend to think that setting boundaries will hurt relationships. While in reality, setting clear boundaries actually helps you to have better relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's funny that there is such a stigma around setting boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that there's the assumption that setting a boundary can hurt your relationships with others, right?
Yeah.
But it actually does the opposite. Let's dissect that a little bit. Susanna, how does that work? Why is it so hard to say no? Let's start there.
Yeah. Good question. And of course, life would be so much easier if we were simply able to tell ourselves to say no. Yeah. And that we then instantly be able to do so.
What a world would that be?
Yes, but things are a little bit more complex than that. And there are a lot of reasons for that. So first of all, it's important to recognize and to say that you're not alone. Over 60% of people report finding it difficult to say no. So, Emma, good news, we're not alone. And why is it so difficult? Because you don't want to cause problems or be seen as difficult. Or you might not know what it is exactly that you feel. Sometimes you even realize at a later point that something did not feel right. And that most of the time comes after the moment has already passed. So, yeah, that could happen. And sometimes you also simply don't know how to say no in that moment. Often we think that to protect our boundaries, we need to be very loud, aggressive, to be able to, be heard and be respected. And for a lot of people, that might feel uncomfortable. So that is why we don't say anything. And then also, when we look from a biological perspective, we also have the basic need for belonging, being part of a group. And when we tell someone no, or we set that boundary, we might feel as if we might get excluded from that particular group, and that we won't belong anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely recognize that last part. For me personally, whenever there's a social gathering or something at the office after work, where we stay longer for maybe drinks and dinner, I always find myself agreeing to it, even though I have a long commute to get home. So sometimes I might prefer to, I don't know, go to the gym or take the evening off, but then still my FOMO kicks in and I'll just agree to come along anyway because I don't want to be excluded.
Yeah. I mean, I also recognize the FOMO, but yeah, I can really relate to this. And yeah, I have also done this in the past. But the moments that I did not say no, I have actually put myself sometimes in a very uncomfortable position. So let me give you this example. Years ago, I was not self-employed for that long, and I worked closely with a professor at a business school. He was very smart, charismatic person, and also very successful in our field.
Right.
And we worked together on different projects, and yeah, I really admired his expertise. So at one point, I really went up to him and I asked him for advice. I wanted to maybe chat with him about how could I grow my business, how could I get involved in bigger assignments, etc. And he said at that moment, okay, let's go for dinner. I've got some ideas. I'd love to help you with that. So we went for dinner. And at first, it felt like really normal, a professional conversation. But then at a certain point, it shifted. He started pointing out how I came across as insecure. And the way he did that was not helpful feedback, but in a way, it really felt, diminishing. And and then at a certain point, while he was explaining a certain breathing technique to me to help me feel, quote unquote, more confident, he all of a sudden placed his hand on my lower stomach without even asking, uninvited. And in that moment, everything in my body just said, no, I don't want this. But at the same time, I really felt small. My muscles felt tight. I felt really, really vulnerable. But and looking back at it, you ask yourself, why? But at that moment, I did not say anything. I did not say stop. I did not say no. I did not push his hand away. What I did was I smiled, I nodded, I stayed polite. And now that, years later, reflecting on it, it was not because I did not wanted to say no, but at that point, my body just froze. Yeah. Have you ever experienced something like that you cannot act?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I really, your story really resonates with me because it sounds really like, he was an expert in the field, could help you, could maybe be a kickstart to growing your own business. So it was an important conversation. You wanted to be polite and and then, him crossing a boundary like that. It's difficult to explain, but I think in such a moment, it's like your body just won't let you move. It won't let you say anything, even though maybe internally you feel like screaming. Oh, but you just can't.
No, exactly. And actually, this is something we talked about in our last episode, because my system froze in an attempt to keep me safe. And also, and you mentioned that already, but there was also hierarchy in the room. Because a power dynamic, basically, a professional dependency. He was someone that I respected, someone who could open doors for me. And that also makes it hard to set a boundary because you start thinking about the consequences. What will happen if I say no? Will I lose opportunities? Will he get angry? Will he tell others that I'm a difficult person? Why I wanted to bring up this example is to show and to illustrate that sometimes it's also difficult to say no because your body takes over to keep you safe. And there's nothing at that point, at that moment, or at least it feels if there's nothing you can do about it, your body just takes over.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a primal survival instinct that kicks in almost.
Yeah.
Gosh. Well, I think that example already drew a really good picture. So I might not even ask. But let's move on to this next question, and that is, why is it absolutely necessary to set boundaries?
Yeah. And of course, this is a very clear example, of
Yeah,
course. But
yeah,
I also think we need to look at it that every boundary matters, even the small everyday ones, because each one is a moment of self respect.
yeah,
And without them, you slowly start to disconnect from yourself because every time you don't react to that inner no, to keep the peace, to stay likable, to avoid discomfort, for example, you chip away a little bit at your own clarity, at your own
yeah,
confidence. And when you do that over and over again, it sends a message to yourself saying, what I need doesn't matter here.
yeah.
And at a certain point, you don't even know how to say no anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that brings us to another really important point here, because when you consistently override your boundaries, inner tension is going to start to build up because you're holding back parts of yourself, and that is going to create internal friction, so
Yes.
to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So over time, that pressure can become too much, and all those suppressed needs and feelings could come out at
Yeah.
once.
Yeah.
So then you might explode at someone,
Yeah.
or you might withdraw yourself entirely from the situation and from the people around you.
Yeah.
And that can then really harm the relationships that you were so trying so hard to protect in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's very contradicting that there's such a stigma around setting boundaries and how that can hurt your relationships, because when you don't set boundaries, that's when you can really hurt your relationships.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
effectively setting boundaries actually helps you prevent any of that happening.
Yeah.
It gives you a way to be honest early on rather than letting it all build up inside until you explode.
Yeah. No, I can really relate to that. I exploded more than once because, I did not mention or my boundaries, or I did not say no. And I think you're totally right. Boundaries and speaking your boundaries brings clarity to your relationships. They create room for mutual respect and also honest conversations, honest connections, because people know, they better know than who you are, what is important for you, etc. So it also does something to the authenticity in your relationships. So boundaries are not a rejection, they are a way of saying, this is how I can stay present, this is what is important for me, and this is how we can stay in a real, respectful and authentic connection.
Yeah. So, having said that, how do you feel where your boundaries lie? How do we feel that? How can you tell?
Yeah, I think that's also a really good question, because sometimes people don't even know what is my boundary, because they don't feel it. And this is also, on the other hand, a tricky question, because I think we've all experienced moments where we felt uncomfortable, but then we told ourselves, just push through, to keep going, and put your feelings or discomfort away. And also, I think we live in a society where this mentality, the pushing through and step over it, is completely normalized.
Yeah.
For example, in most organizations, it is still the norm, and it might not even be how do you say it, a norm that people talk about, but yeah, you still see that people, that it's normal to push yourself to your limits and
Yeah.
work overtime,
It's
taking
like an
on,
unwritten rule.
yeah, an unwritten rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's taking on extra responsibilities, even while you might not feel you have space for it. And this makes it even more difficult to feel your boundaries because it's so normalized to overstep them.
Right.
And I also think that it's important to mention here that we feel our boundaries physically first, and then you start thinking about them. So, therefore, it's so important to recognize these signals that your body sends so you can feel your boundaries and also feel when they are being crossed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the starting point is really listening to the signals in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of like that moment when someone makes a joke at your expense and everyone laughs, and then you can just feel your stomach drop. Like you
Yeah.
can just feel a
Yeah.
knot in your
Yeah.
chest. Or
Yeah.
when someone brings up something painful and you just feel it like in your throat. Even though you will probably just smile politely or laugh
Yeah.
along with the joke,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
your body is basically telling you like, "Ooh, this doesn't feel good."
Yeah. Yeah. And you can feel that in your jaw, that's almost the fake smile, the
Yeah.
mask that you then put on. Yeah, exactly. So you might feel your muscles tense, your breath shortens, or you feel a knot in your stomach. And that's your body saying, here lies a boundary.
Right.
Let me give you an example of this because recently I facilitated a training on boundary setting. And we did a centering exercise to help participants feel the difference between being present and connected and in contact with themselves versus being out of contact. We call that being on center, being off center. And
Right.
we do an exercise so that you can really feel the difference. And while we were doing that exercise, one participant became visibly emotional as she tuned into to her body. She even teared up, and
Wow.
when we talked to her and we're in the conversation with her, she said, yeah, I can suddenly feel so many boundaries just by checking in with her body. And
Right.
she also felt how often she crosses her boundaries or let other people cross her boundaries.
Yeah.
And that moment really stayed with me because it reminded us all, the entire group and this particular participant, that your body holds so much information. And when you are able to listen to it, it becomes clear what feels right and what does not. And ignoring those signals over time, that is incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating that that your body, even though you might not actually know it, it's sending you signals, and it knows for you, so to
Yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's why we also talk about the intelligence of your body. And
yeah.
we all have that. We just need to start listening to it.
Exactly. So this centering exercise, it's one way to feel these boundaries in your body. But at Doors Open, we also use a tool called the STAND framework.
Yes.
And this is a tool that will help you recognize your boundaries with more clarity as well, right?
Yeah.
So, Susanna, could you maybe walk us through it?
Yeah, no, definitely. So indeed, we call it the STAND framework. And the S of STAND stands for sensation. So, what is happening physically? Do you have a tight jaw? Where is your breath? Is it shallow? What's happening to your posture? Is it frozen or still flexible? because your body often knows before your thoughts understand what's really going on. So the first
Right.
thing you need to tap into is actually your physical body.
Yeah.
And
Physical
that's
sensations.
yeah, and that's what we call the S for sensations. And then the T stands for thinking space. Can you really hear your own thoughts? Or is your mind foggy? Is your clarity gone? We all know this, huh? When you feel overwhelmed or stressed, or yeah, your boundaries are overstepped, then it's difficult to think clearly. So, do you still have space to think? T, thinking space. And then the A is for affect. So what is the effect? What emotions are showing up? Maybe anger, which could mean a line has been crossed. Sadness, maybe points out to something unspoken. Or yeah, so you really have to think of what signals do you get? Your emotions are signals. They point you in the direction of something that does not feel right. And then the N stands for narrative. And this is also an important one. So see, whose story are you in? Are you still grounded in your own truth? So really feeling, okay, this is my boundary, these are my values, this is my truth. Or are you pulled into someone else's version of reality? Sometimes when we yeah, are in a discussion, or there's a lot of tension, then when you feel your boundary, you could also easily be pulled in somebody else's story because they say, no, you're not right. How could you think like this? And then before you know it, you step into their story and maybe you feel like, okay, maybe you have a point. Never mind. I'm not speaking up. And then the D stands for do I have a voice? So can you speak up at that moment? Or do you shut down to keep the peace? So yeah, this is where the stand framework stands for.
Right, right. And of course, we understand that this is really difficult to apply while you're in the moment.
Yes.
So I would just like to mention that we don't immediately expect you to immediately be able to apply this while you're in the thick of it. But that is why we tell you to practice this a lot. Practice it beforehand. If you know that you've got a difficult conversation coming up, use this tool. Or afterwards, use it to reflect on difficult moments after they've already happened. Just use it to see, hey, what happened there? And if you practice this enough, at one point, eventually, you will be able to recognize this faster. And I think that awareness, that moment of grounding, that can help you stay present even under pressure. And eventually you will be able to use this tool while you're in the moment. But don't expect to be able to do that straight away.
No. I think that is a very good point that you make here, because it's also all about practice. And yeah, the question was, okay, how do you recognize your boundaries? Because sometimes we don't even feel them. And this framework can help you with that. And exactly what you're saying, you can reflect on it before you know that you have a difficult conversation, but also after the fact, because there's a lot of learning in reflecting on what just happened there. What did I feel in my body? Where were my thoughts? What emotions came up, etc. So, yeah, good point. But yeah, really practice it a lot, because then you can pull it up when you most need it.
Exactly. Right. So let's dive into the real question of today that I'm sure everyone is waiting for at this point. How do you actually set a boundary effectively?
Yeah, the big question. Yeah, but before we are able to truly answer that, I think it was good that we needed to understand what happens before the boundary is set, before you're able to set that boundary. Because the effectiveness of a boundary depends on your internal clarity, on
Yeah.
knowing what you feel, what you need, what is important for you, but also what your body is telling you. And I think it's important to understand that without that awareness, it's much harder to set a boundary effectively.
Yeah.
Okay, but how do you set a boundary? Let's make it simple. You don't need to justify, defend, or explain everything. I think it's good to start with that
Yeah.
because a boundary can be one clear, simple sentence like, that doesn't work for me, or I'm not available for that. I need more clarity before I can agree. So, really clear, simple sentences. And of course, sometimes you might freeze in the moment, and that's okay. You can always come back and say, hey, I've been thinking about our conversation. I need to name something that did not feel right.
Yeah.
So you can always come back to that, huh? And remember, your boundary is really valid, even if it takes you some time to express it. So coming back later with clarity is still powerful. And why we say that is because, and I'm sure everybody recognizes this. Yeah, that after the fact, or when you drive home, or later at home, you feel like, I should have said this or that. So yeah, you can always come back to it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really important that we make that clear here. That boundaries don't have an expiration date. It's not like you can't come back to it. And I think a lot of people forget about that sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think also setting a boundary. It's not about being loud, right? About being aggressive.
No.
It just has to be true for you, and it's good to remember that a boundary isn't a wall. It's not a something that you're just going to put out there and then hide behind and then
Yeah.
not face it again.
Yeah.
It's really more of a signal. It just says, this is what's real for me.
Mm.
This is what I need in order to stay connected to myself and to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think this is a good reminder when you are dealing with setting boundaries, that it is indeed as simple as saying, this is what's real for me and what I need in order to stay connected in this relationship to myself, but also to you. And actually, here's where embodiment comes in, huh? Because when your body is grounded, aligned, centered, as we say, your words carry more weight, even if they're soft. So you don't need to be loud and aggressive.
Yeah.
Because when you're centered, they can be soft, but they can have real impact. And also, besides that, when you're calm and grounded, it also becomes easier to say what you want to say without getting overwhelmed and getting foggy in your brain, in your thoughts. So being calm, being grounded, being centered, you will see that it will be easier for you to say what you want to say. And that's why centering is such an essential practice, especially when setting boundaries. It helps you really access your truth, what is important for you. And then it also helps you to communicate this in a calm and clear way.
Yeah.
And the practice of centering, in the centering practice, we work with 3 dimensions: length, width, and depth. And when it comes to boundaries, of course, all 3 of them are important, but length is especially important because this is about standing tall in your pride, in your dignity. So it's about feeling your spine literally rise without pushing that, but also not shrinking. It's about staying connected to your own sense of self-worth, even in challenging conversations. So that length, that is really, like I said, your pride, your dignity, you're standing here in your truth. And having said that, it's also equally important that you feel your feet on the floor, because that groundedness reminds your system, basically, so your nervous system, that you're safe. You are here and you are allowed to take up space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really beautiful shift, right? Because you go from reacting in fear to responding from center. So you enable yourself to respond in a grounded way that is aligned with how you feel and what is important for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember when I mentioned that I froze and I could not speak, this centering really helps you to be able to speak up and to say no, because it calms your nervous system down, and then your nervous system feels safe and does not have to protect you to go into a freeze mode. So basically before you speak, pause, feel your feet on the floor, breathe from your center, then lengthen your spine, and then feel what comes forward. What is your truth that you want to speak? And from that space of clarity, calmness, being centered, from that space, speak your boundary.
Yeah. Boundaries are not the end of connection. No. They're actually the beginning of something more honest, more respectful, and more sustainable. And if you feel any guilt or discomfort when you set a boundary, please know that that's completely normal. It just means that you're practicing something new.
Thank you for listening. And if today's episode resonated, please share it with others. And maybe try to set one small boundary this week.
Subscribe now to Beyond the Corporate Mask, a podcast powered by Doors Open, Institute for Corporate Sociology, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Leadership doesn't have to be exhausting. If you need to pause, reconnect with your body, and experience how embodied leadership can help you make clearer decisions, hold boundaries, and lead without hiding yourself, join us for the next edition of the Embodied Leadership Retreat. Details are in the show notes.
You've been listening to Beyond the Corporate Mask. Remember, your body has the answers. So let's start unpacking who you are and who you're ready to become.